Hello and welcome to the Paxmundi show, where we will be trying to shed some light on the new dark age of the global war of terror and to try and deconstruct some of the myths and disinformation about the global war of terror. First off, I'm going to start with some recent news. The International Arms Trade Treaty was this week agreed by the UN General Assembly on Tuesday with 154 in favour and 3 against, 23 other states abstaining. The 3 states that voted against the treaty were North Korea, Iran and Syria. Now, it isn't as though they've been implacably against the idea of an arms trade treaty, but their objections are specifically that the treaty as it stands is flawed because it does not prohibit the transfer, sale of arms to non-state actors. These are, these proxy armies, rebel groups, etc., that have been armed in recent times. Currently in Syria, groups there are being armed by the same states who are actually proposing the treaty. In Libya, we saw groups being armed, and Iran also faces internal terrorism from a group called the Mujahideen al-Khalq, who are armed by the CIA. So the resolution was actually proposed by the UK and was jointly supported by Mexico, which is facing a massive escalation in domestic conflict due to the influx of weapons, most of them illegal, from the US. Cynically, the UK is actually a major arms exporter and has now stated publicly that they are in the process of arming these supposed rebels, Syrian groups, arming and training them in Jordan. The US, which initially stalled the treaty, but has subsequently come on board with the proviso that the arms trade treaty should not affect the domestic laws of the US, the Second Amendment rights to bear arms. They initially stalled due to massive lobbying from the NRA, the National Rifle Association, which is one of the most powerful groups, lobbying groups in the US. It does look unlikely that the US will ever ratify the treaty due to NRA lobbying. Over in Palestine, we've seen an upsurge in violence in the last week following the death of a 64-year-old Palestinian prisoner, Abu Hamdaya. He died of an untreated cancer illness in an Israeli prison where he was serving a life sentence. The Israelis refused to treat him, and when he died, they said, well, he was a heavy smoker. So, you know, that was the cause of his death. Following the death of Abu Hamdaya, there has been spontaneous, sporadic actions, particularly by groups of young Palestinians, throwing petrol bombs, rolling burning tires, and then hiding behind improvised wooden shields, and doing this against a heavily armed Israeli defense force. The Israeli defense force responded with tear gas canisters and rubber bullets, as a result of which two youths, Palestinian youths, Nasser and Belbisi, have been killed so far. They were killed by rubber bullets which were shot at their heads. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president of the West Bank, stated that the Israelis' use of lethal force against demonstrations was to provoke chaos in the West Bank. And all of this comes within 2 weeks of President Obama's state visit to Israel and the West Bank, where he told Palestinians that they must not ask for an end to Israeli settlement. The West Bank currently has over 340,000 Jewish settlers, and these settlements and their supply roads are cutting off different communities in the West Bank, which is technically an occupied territory. So, just as an aside, these really are. This isn't current, but looking at the issue of false flag operations. You know, false flag operations are something that we often suspect at the time, but you never have the proof, and often the proof of, you know, the manipulation and construction of false flag events will often come out years later. And I was recently doing a bit of research on Zimbabwe, on contemporary Zimbabwean history, and looking at the development of the single-party state in Zimbabwe following the Zimbabwean independence after their armed struggle for majority rule. After the unilateral declaration of independence by the Smith regime. I don't know how many of you would remember that, but following the victory of that war, which was waged by two separate armed groups, independence organizations. They were ZANU, who were a majority Shona ethnic base. The Shona people are a Bantu tribe, and that was Mugabe's power base was ZANU. Now, the other group were ZAPU, who were basically Ndebele ethnic base. The Ndebele are the other major group in Zimbabwe, and they're of Zulu origin. So, following independence, there was a coalition initially between ZANU and ZAPU, with Robert Mugabe being the president, and Joshua Nkomo, who represented ZAPU, was the prime minister. Now, a power struggle and a conflict developed between the two groups, and as a result of which there was a purge within the government, and subsequently within the army, which was composed of both groups. And so in the areas of Matabeleland, which was the dominant Ndebele area, dissident ZAPU fighters deserted from the Zimbabwean armed forces, where they feared that they would be marginalised and were at risk, and so they were an armed group, and they'd abandoned their bases, and they were at loose in the Matabeleland, the Ndebele areas. Now, these dissident ZAPU fighters were blamed for a series of banditry incidents, civilian deaths and robberies of civilian communities in Matabeleland. And these incidents kind of justified a military action by the Zimbabwean Defence Forces against the ZAPU dissidents on the grounds that they had been committing these atrocities. Now, I was recently reading these documents that actually revealed that the South African government, which was at that time an apartheid regime, this is in the 1980s, had actually been arming and organising proxy groups in Zimbabwe, who they had named Super ZAPU, and they'd actually sent these people into Zimbabwe to carry out these atrocities, which destabilized Zimbabwe and created to some extent escalated this power struggle between ZANU and ZAPU. And I just thought I would throw that one in for those of you who may be aware of that period of history. Now, I'd like to just ask anybody to call in, and you can call in by Skype, and you can Skype at Bob's Backyard. That's Bob's Backyard. Or you can telephone, call 0044 if you're outside of the UK, and 0161 298 0298. Now, just while I continue with the Tales from the Dark Side, I came across another very interesting bit of information. For me it was anyway, and you can always learn something, and often, you come across things when you're not looking for them. And this was a bit of information about the the Order of Malta, the Order of the Knights of Malta. And this popped up into my Google search. the website of the Sovereign Military Hospitallers Order of St. John of Jerusalem, of Rhodes and Malta, commonly known as the Knights of Malta and the Order of Malta. Now, I didn't know that much about them. I've heard a lot of stories, about. Clearly they were a part of the Crusader regime, the Crusader movement, but I hadn't actually realised the longevity of this organisation and the power that they hold. So what I'm reading is that the order has actually been in existence since 1048 and was founded by someone called Gerard, and they've moved around a lot. Initially they were in Jerusalem, and they've been in Malta for a long time, but this military religious, it's a quasi-military religious order of the Christian and of the Catholic, authorized by the Pope, and they were authorized to hold arms, to occupy Malta and other territories, and they continue to exist, and they continue to wield incredible influence. They not only have an ambassador to the EU, a permanent ambassador to the EU, they have a permanent observer status at the UN, and they have bilateral diplomatic relations with over 104 different states, and that really, to some extent, it shocked me. This just shows the power that these people have, these dark forces, the longevity of these Christian religious military orders still in existence over 960 years later. So I just thought I'd throw that one in for you. Don't forget to call in. If you've got anything to say on any of these subjects, you can Skype on Bob's Backyard or call 0044 if you're outside of the UK, 0161 2980 Now, the main topic that I'd like to talk about tonight is the growing and escalating conflict between North and South Korea. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen the tension growing with reports in the Western media of North Korean threats to the United States, South Korea, and their allies, principally Japan. Now, I always like to try to get a bit more background, anything. You've got to try and find out as much as you can about, the history of these conflicts in order to put them into context and, to place this current escalation of the conflict between North and South Korea into its historical context. Now, I don't know how many of you will know that from 1910 to 1945, Korea was actually a Japanese colony it was a part of the Japanese Empire, and indeed there is still a lot of resentment towards Japan from Koreans, both in the south and the north. While it was a part of the Japanese Empire, the Japanese tried forcibly to actually, I can't think of the verb, to Japanify the Koreans, to force them to adopt the Shinto religion and to also use the Japanese language and to adopt Japanese customs. One of the other things that there is still a lot of resentment for was the forced labour conscription of males during the Second World War, and the forced conscription of females to be used as prostitutes for the Japanese army. So Korean women were basically kidnapped en masse and taken to various parts of the Japanese Empire then, which stretched across Southeast Asia, and they were referred to as comfort women, to give comfort to the Japanese soldiers. So, following the Second World War, after 1945, much like the post-war division of Germany in Europe, where part of half of Germany was occupied by the Western Allies, the US, France, and the UK, and the other part was occupied by the Soviet Union forces, and they became two separate states. The West became the Federal Republic, and the East Germany became the Democratic Republic. So similarly, in Korea, Korea was divided with the US occupying the south of Korea and the Soviet Union occupying the north. The US quickly organized elections and established the Republic of Korea in 1945, which was promptly then recognized by the United Nations as the sole government of all Korean territory. So from then on, the area, the subsequent government of the North would not be recognized by the UN as having domain over their territory. So in the North, there was a communist-style government which was established under Soviet occupation as the Democratic Republic of Korea. In 1950, a conflict then broke out between the North Korean government, the Democratic Republic of Korea, and the South Korea, the Republic of Korea. And this was known as the Korean War, with the UN supporting both politically and militarily the South Korean government. There were UN forces. I think we even had British forces as part of the UN contingents, and these were under the command of the US. And the North Korea was getting support from the Soviet Union and China and the Warsaw Pact countries. Now, the war continued until 1953, when there was an armistice which was signed which agreed to split North and South Korea along the 38th parallel, with a demilitarized zone between the disputed borders. So that's pretty much up to date. I believe we've got a caller online, and I'm just going to... John, are you there?
No, call was Darcy.
Ah, Dar. Sorry. Are you there, Darcy?
Hello. 1 second there, I need to mute. Yeah, I was just asking in chat. For my sins, I was watching BBC News earlier, which I probably shouldn't do. But what they were saying is that the war between North and South Korea is still ongoing. The only reason it's stopped is because there's been a ceasefire in place. And what North Korea are doing is they're positioning to get a peace agreement. And I mean, forgive me, I'm very uneducated about this. You know a lot about this, it sounds like. But I was kind of thinking, well, maybe there should be a peace agreement. And it would be really interesting to hear your take on perhaps why that's not a good idea.
No, I actually think that is definitely a good idea. That is clearly what is needed, that they do need, a peace agreement, a ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, and demilitarization. What one could hope for eventually for unification, but that's certainly a long way off. You're quite right that the war has never ended. I was saying that in the war, when I say it continued, I meant hostilities continued until 1953. And what was signed was an armistice. That was just really a ceasefire. And it's a ceasefire which has been broken, over the years. There's been ongoing tit-for-tat border incidents over the years with, live rounds being fired from one side or the other. But more recently, there had been developments in the early part of the last decade, the 2000s, where there was some rapport between South Korea and North Korea, because clearly they've got the interest in having, they don't want to live in a permanent state of war. That can't be good for any people.
Yeah, for sure.
And therefore, there were initiatives to allow people to visit, for example, because much like it was when East and West Germany were separated, there's people in Korea, North and South Korea, who families have been split for now over 50 years, going on 60 years. And the only way that these people have had to go to other territories to actually meet. They would go to Hong Kong, for example, to meet their families if they could get permission. That is the people who live in North Korea. So definitely it's in their interest to have a peace agreement. I think the big obstacle to a peace agreement and the cause of the escalation and continued state of war conflict has been the US.
I was nearly going to say that. I was just waiting for it.
Unfortunately, as a part of the Cold War, it suited the US to really control South Korea, which, although it's called a republic and is espoused as a democracy, was actually under military rule for a couple of decades at least. From that would be 1960 to 1979. I think that's nearly 3 decades. It was actually under the rule of President Park Chung-il-chung, and that was military rule then. And clearly, it suited the US strategic goals during the Cold War to keep the two states divided, much like East and West Germany were divided. And it was only following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1992, and then the glasnost and liberalization in the Warsaw Pact countries in Eastern Germany, that things were able to change there. But unfortunately for the Koreans, they had no such luck. For various reasons, it suited US interests to keep North Korea isolated. Indeed, when the Soviet Union collapsed, North Korea, which was actually heavily dependent on Soviet subsidies, that's for fuel and for food, much like Cuba, who was also in the same situation, they faced mass starvation. Now, luckily for the Cubans, they were able to find, a way out of that situation and to change their agricultural system, their agricultural production, so that they decentralized their production and they demechanized their production. Unfortunately, for North Korea, they were unable to do this because of the nature of their state, because of the centralization and rigid form of their planned economy. They weren't and they faced massive starvation. Millions died in North Korea, and this was escalated by the economic embargo that went along with the political embargo. So they were unable to import food from anywhere else, and we watched the Koreans die. We knew they were dying, and we make such a big fuss about helping the victims of famine in other parts of the world. But because this was a communist regime and they were the enemy, we let them die in absolute indifference. So definitely they need, the people there need peace. That's certainly what they all need, North and South Korea.
So, just coming back then, do you think that the US are just more interested in hanging on to the last remnants of a Cold War against communism than just saying let the Koreans get on with it themselves. I mean, is that a possibility, or would that be a bad thing for the world? I don't know.
Well, I think definitely it would be a good thing for them. I think it would be a good thing for the whole world if the US, and well, I include the UK, if we stopped interfering in other people's affairs. For too long, the Western powers have dominated and manipulated the affairs, internal affairs of sovereign states around the globe, and definitely it would be in their interest. I think that the current scenario has escalated due to the prescription of any state, particularly North Korea, from developing nuclear weapons, and you see it now with Iran. So there is this. I call it. It is a paradox that we have the dominant powers who have the nuclear weapons, the original nuclear powers, Russia, formerly Soviet Union, the US, the UK, and France, along with China, which later developed the nuclear weapons. And we have this these UN treaties prohibiting any other states from developing nuclear weapons. Now, in 2006, North Korea announced that they had developed nuclear weapons, and then the UN subsequently passed a resolution 1718 that prohibited them from further developing or testing nuclear weapons. So then in 2009, the North Korea carried out a nuclear test, announced that they'd done this, and then have subsequently gone on to develop missile technology, clearly to defend themselves, against a power, the US, which is a nuclear power. But we can see a real difference in the way in which North Korea was treated. That there was this UN resolution prohibiting them from developing nuclear weapons, and we've seen similar in the case of Iran. Yet then we look at the way in which Pakistan, India, and Israel have been treated, and they were also supposedly unauthorized developers of nuclear weapons. They've all unilaterally announced that they had achieved nuclear capability, but neither Pakistan or India was prescribed. They've had no sanctions against them, and no economic embargo or threats made against them. And as far as Israel is concerned, their nuclear capability isn't even mentioned or acknowledged by anyone. It is like the elephant in the room.
Agreed. I totally agree with the fact that nobody's batted an eyelid about Pakistan having nuclear weapons, although they're heavily linked to Afghanistan and terrorism, especially with whether you believe it or not, the recent capture of Osama bin Laden in a compound in Pakistan. It just seems, although Iran, obviously, Iran's not allowed to have nuclear weapons. I mean, I don't see why everyone has to have nuclear weapons. Maybe way back in the day when America first got them, they should have said nobody can have them. We're the only ones. But I don't know. Maybe that would have been bad too.
Yeah, so clearly the nuclear issue is one which is being used to justify continuing the conflict and to justify escalating the conflict. So that conflict has escalated. As I say, there'd been initiatives from the South Korea to have better relations with North Korea. They'd allowed people to visit, and they had created economic economic activity areas in North Korea, where South Korea, a capitalist system, has actually developed areas of business parks in North Korea, and that's currently still ongoing, even though there is this conflict. But a number of things have caused it to escalate. So in 2010, there was an incident where a South Korean warship was allegedly torpedoed by North Korean forces. Now, North Korea denied responsibility for this incident, and this is in the context of where they do, both states have regularly fired live rounds and had, shooting matches at each other along the border. So the North Koreans denied any responsibility for this incident, and to me, I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist, I guess, but that does definitely smell of false flag operation. It much like the Tonkin incident. I don't know if you'd remember the Tonkin incident, which
I've heard about it.
The Vietnam War. It was again the torpedoing of a US boat, which actually gave the US the public support to go to escalate the war in Vietnam, to send for US ground troops into Vietnam. And that was called the Tonkin incident. Now, at the time, North Vietnam denied responsibility, but it has subsequently been revealed from Freedom of Information Act information years later in the US that the Tonkin incident was completely fabricated. But once you've got that public support, and there is a kind of a pattern there, the blowing up of ships does seem to be a favoured method of false flag operation to justify war. They actually had a similar one in Havana Harbour. That would be in, I think, 1905, when Cuba was actually occupied by Spain. It was then a part of the Spanish Empire, and a US ship, the US was trying to look for reasons to take to have a war with Spain, to take Cuba, and eventually to take the Philippines from Spain. They sent this ship, the US Maine, into Havana Harbor, and it got blown up. Well, that was another case in hand, really, of a false flag operation which justified a war. That was the Spanish-American War, which gave America the colony of Cuba and of the Philippines, which they still retain influence in the Philippines to date. So that incident certainly escalated things, between the North Korea and South Korea. And then subsequently in April last year, North Korea launched a rocket, Bright Star 3. Now, they use this to put a satellite up in space, like many states do. Even the European Union has put satellites up. Many states now have that kind of technology. I think Iran has also, or is perhaps aiming to put. They tried to put satellites up, and that was another incident that has been used to vilify North Korea in the Western media, stating that the missile technology is for military purposes and will be used to drop weapons on the US to actually threaten the US and their allies, principally Japan. So I'd like to just pick up on how North Korea is depicted in the Western media. Now, it is depicted as being very backward and paranoid. Now, clearly this is a product. Some of the nature of the North Korean state will be a product of their economic and political isolation. So North Korea is a bit of a paradox. It's a socialist but dynastic rule. So it has been dominated by the Kim family. The first president being Kim To-bang, then replaced by Kim Il-sung, and the former president Kim Jong-il. Now, I don't know if any of you would remember a cartoon film called Team America. I don't know if anybody's seen that. It was in the film.
Yeah.
Team America. So in the film, they caricatured the president Kim Jong-il in the cartoon, singing "I Am So Lonely." That's I don't know who would remember that, but it gives you an idea of the way in which we look at North Korea, and that has continued. The current president is now Kim Jong-un, the son of Kim Jong-il. And the tensions have greatly escalated, with the US carrying out joint exercises with South Korea.
Was Kim Jong-un, there was two of them, wasn't there? One of them was very westernized. he liked Disney World and going out to discos and partying. He was actually the eldest son.
That's
who
right.
should have actually become the new
one.
Which I think really. But Daddy didn't like him going out to Disney World and fast women and hot cars or is it hot cars and fast women?
Yeah, it was a bit of both, I think.
Yeah. So he was kind of, I suppose, the North Korean that was pulled into the South Korean ideology.
Yeah, he was sidelined, and he had been going abroad, hadn't he? He'd been travelling to Hong Kong and Japan and other places where maybe they didn't trust him anymore.
Well, he didn't seem to fit
They thought he'd been seduced by Western capitalism.
Yeah, and the only other question I've got like this, did John Cleese teach them all how to march?
I think he may have had something to do with that, Paul. You know, that and the very big hats, you may have noticed they march with a goose step, and they also have extremely big military caps that are like twice as big as their heads.
I'm not allowed to mention. I'm actually been. I've sworn not to mention anything about anyone wearing hats. I can't talk about hats, unfortunately.
Okay, well we'll just pass on that one. Are you still there, Dorothy?
Yes, mate, I am indeed. I'd say thanks very much for answering my questions and talking to me. I appreciate it very much.
So, well, just to bring it up to date, the tensions have, really escalated in the last couple of weeks. As I say, the US has been carrying out joint live military manoeuvres with South Korea, in particularly naval manoeuvres in the disputed areas, and they've also sent 2 stealth bombers to South Korea. So they've got these 2 monsters which are, flying around in South Korea, maybe even, over North Korean airspace. And certainly they are threatening North Korea. This is like a show of power. And as a result of which, the North Koreans are responding with threats and rhetoric. So the US has sent 2 guided missile destroyers, I think that is just yesterday, to South Korea. They have announced that they are completely changing their missile shield program. So you may recall that they were developing a program in Europe against Russia. They're now moving those to the Southeast Asia and placing the missiles in Guam. So this is really escalating it. We're probably nearer to nuclear war than we were ever. So I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. Thanks for listening.
I'm just going to say, I think a lot of it's all about the fear porn. We're all supposed to be really, really worried about this. Maybe we should be, and maybe it's just a bunch of rhetoric. Who knows?
Well, let's hope not. Yeah. So thanks for listening, and see you next week.
Things, yes, lots and lots of different things. There's chat, there's music, diversity, an occasional argument, for the warmongers. We need to have a little bit of war and argument for those people who just live in the fucking fear factory.
listening to lies all my life. Time to turn off that road. Join the side of justice, free from remote control. Radio independence, get the real news. Listen to the free radio, make up your mind and choose. Selling the information, patenting the ideas, controlling communication, persuading us that we're free. Radio independence, get the real news. Listen to the free radio, make up your mind and choose. Listen to the free radio, make up your mind and choose. If you don't want to wear a barcode, you don't want your genes on file, if you don't want the voice of America, you've got to retune the dial to Radio Independence. Get the real news. Listen to the free radio, make up your mind and choose. Radio Independence. Get the real news. Listen to the free radio, make up your mind and choose. Listen to the free radio, make up your mind and choose. When at last the people are free to be who we want to be, we'll take away all our pain and we'll go dancing in the rain.